San Francisco field office. Thank you.
Hi, Eric. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank us today for our panel on the power of partnership with the California Promise Zones. My name is Ashley Wolf, and I work as a program analyst in HUD's Office of Field Policy and Management in the San Francisco Regional Office, and I have the pleasure of assisting with many of our place-based initiatives, including Promise Zones and Opportunity Zones. As previously mentioned, Promise Zones are a place-based initiative that brings together coalitions of partners from different levels of government, as well as members of the public and private sector. Our Promise Zones here in California have been leading these efforts nationally, building strong partnerships with over 300 organizations from across the state and securing millions of dollars in federal funding, specifically targeting these high-needs communities. I'm very excited for you all to get a chance to hear from them. But before seeing us today and our Promise Zone leadership for all of their hard work and dedication in serving some of California's most vulnerable communities. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Robert Jameson, who is moderating this panel with me for an overview and introduction of today's panelists.
Thank you, Ashley. The following panel of California Promise Zone leadership will be able to shed light on the amazing work that has been done in their communities this past year and on the work still to come. The format for today's panel will be as follows. We will begin with presentations from each of the Promise Zones in California. The order will be first, the South Los Angeles Transit Empowerment Zone, who will be represented by Paul Polito, the Los Angeles Promise Zone by Elder Sanabria, Sacramento Promise Zone by Julius Austin, the San Diego Promise Zone by Zio Crespo. In terms of questions, I'm sure there will be questions from participants. Once all of the presentations have completed, we will address any and all questions that have arisen. To submit your questions, please utilize the chat box at any time during the presentations, and we will collect them to be asked during the Q&A portion. The chat function will also remain live during the Q&A as well, in case any questions arise in real time or any follow-ups you would like to add. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to our first presenter, Dr. Paul Polito, who is the interim director for the South LA Transit Empowerment Zone. So Paul, please begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to first start off with a thank you to our HUD partners and our GO-Biz partners for organizing this event and providing a platform for our Promise Zone partners to really highlight the activities and share our approaches, in pursuit of the Promise Zone goals, but also maybe providing some comments on the overlay with opportunity zones themselves. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So as noted at the top, we represent SLATE-Z, which is our catchy acronym for the South Los Angeles Transit Empowerment Zone, otherwise known as the South Los Angeles Promise Zone. We received our designation in 2016, which was the third round of designations under the Promise Zone program. We currently have 71 implementation partners spanning across community-based organizations, private philanthropy, government organizations, government departments, and other private entities that are just interested in participating in this type of a collaborative. To date, we've received over $50 million in federal grants, with a lot more. I just haven't been up on my numbers yet to report on the other sources. And we're also conducting activities broadly in 5 key issue areas, looking at jobs and workforce development, economic activity and small business support, education outcomes, public safety, and transit. We do this through organizing around a collective impact strategy through which our backbone team provides constant communication across all of our 71 implementation partners, plus about another 35 that are in process of figuring out how to sign on to our MOU. We manage a common agenda that animates projects and programs across all of our different issue areas. We help to organize a data-driven measurement system that allows our partners to track their progress towards all of these different goals. And through all of these activities, we try to engage in just mutually reinforcing projects and programs through which our partners can celebrate in shared victories, but then also figure out how they can use those to mobilize and uplift their various individual projects themselves. Our overall approach is really to knock down silos across these traditionally separated arenas, trying to streamline and navigate the policy process, and acknowledging the interconnectedness of all of these key issue areas while we try to innovate solutions aimed at mitigating what we see as the effects from decades of structural inequity, such as redlining and other discriminatory policies. I'll go on to the next slide. So just wanted to highlight a couple of the key accomplishments we've achieved maybe within the past 12, 18 months. Had I been given 2 hours, I could have gone longer, but I have about 8 minutes. So I just wanted to highlight some of the more maybe exciting opportunities that may have some overlay with some of the other subjects we'll be talking about. The first one being a Transformative Climate Communities Planning Grant we received. And throughout this calendar year, we've been conducting some community outreach efforts. It was an interesting process because right as we were starting with our community engagement efforts, COVID-19 hit, which really was a forced opportunity to figure out how we could innovate doing community engagement in a digital format. I think it's been done to great success, being able to really engage the community with what it means to engage in the type of sustainability efforts and sustainability projects that can transform a community with that idea of environmental justice in mind. And also how that has had some interconnectedness with opportunity zones, as our project does span across many of those census tracts. Another kind of key accomplishment I want to highlight, again, similarly related, is around the California Air Resources Board Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, through which we are attempting to pilot a universal basic mobility concept. Again, it's in a bit of their nascent stages, but this was a bit of a wild pitch from our Los Angeles Department of Transportation, trying to think about how we can try to increase access to various types of transit for high need communities, and then how that can also serve as a springboard looking at sustainable transportation options. This is a community co-creation process through which we're looking at how we can uplift community leaders and leverage community connections to really figure out what those strategies look like and how that can actually spill over and serve as a best practice for other communities within Los Angeles, but also across the state and maybe even the country. Another key highlight that we have is the Ascend LA project. In partnership with our partner, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, we piloted a training, we can call it a training to connection pipeline, through which we identified a cadre of businesses and really did an analysis of what their needs were, and ultimately trying to connect them to 3 different components for successfully procuring contracts, which would be the technical assistance side, identifying additional training or assistance that they need to build up their businesses, figuring out how we can connect those businesses to various access to capital opportunities, whether that's low interest loans or other types of ways so that they can bump up their capacity to execute. And then finally, working with our business partners to figure out how to navigate the procurement process, whether that's through our public partners, at the county, at the city level, or even trying to build additional relationships with more anchor type businesses in the area that might have an opportunity for these individual businesses. So it's really exciting because they just completed the first cohort this past Friday with a culmination event, and we're looking to begin recruitment for other small businesses in the area to also go through. Another topic on the list is this idea of resilience hubs. I think in the initial conception of what a resilience hub was, this was more about environmentally sustainable community centers and how those could serve as a way to alleviate some of the environmental effects, particularly those that are experienced by South Los Angeles. As we saw with COVID-19, there was an immediate need for ways for communities to rally to serve as information distribution points, and even more so for things like food distribution and other resource distribution, and just places to get answers to alleviate the issues that our residents were dealing with. And so when we think about resilience hubs, how could that be a way to set up an entire network where, should there be another pandemic or another major crisis such as a pandemic, what can we do to try to increase the resilience of a community through something such as a resilience hub? So we will begin engaging in some community engagement activities to try to figure out the best way to implement that within our communities. And finally, bring it back a couple slides. Not quite on the priorities yet, but on the key accomplishments, thinking about also student transit access, how, again, just, it's in the title of our Promise Zone, figuring out how, because transit can provide so much access to educational opportunities, workforce development opportunities, work learning opportunities, continuing to figure out how we can overlay a lot of the different opportunities across all of the different public and private partnerships that we have formulated, and thinking about how we can connect our residents to anything that's popping up. I'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So again, priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, just continuing to spotlight the work we're doing on Slauson Avenue, which again ties in with our Transformative Climate Communities work, thinking about how we can transform the community vision that we are going to be finalizing and how we can then turn that into a way to advocate for additional support, additional resources to bring that community vision to life. Again, as I highlighted, rolling out universal basic mobility and what that means for transit access, yes, but then also is that a business opportunity for the community benefit to think about electrification, looking at ride share, car share, what that could mean and how the community has a hand in designing those types of interventions. I've been emphasizing community engagement as something that we're continuing to highlight. That is a core aspect of the way that we're organized for the South Los Angeles Promise Zone, as a lot of our successes really rely on our residents being able to leverage their formal and informal networks and really drumming up support for a lot of the initiatives that we are piloting. Another key priority is looking at foster youth resources. This is going to be a major substantive focus of the Envision Center designation that our partner recently received this year, the Coalition for Responsible Community Development, and thinking about how there can be greater access to housing resources, to workforce development resources, and maybe a little bit also down the line, how we can encourage the development of entrepreneurial opportunities, particularly for the foster youth community. And then somewhat similarly related, thinking about, again, bridging the digital divide with COVID-19, again, forcing people into their homes, as we think about stay-at-home orders. What does that mean from an education standpoint? How can we get students access to either broadband access, computers, and other resources that are critical so that there isn't that loss in the educational attainment? As you can see from, we already have communities that are kind of lagging behind and really need these assistance. So what are we doing to help bridge in a digital divide era? Go to the next slide. Just providing opportunity zones at a glance for South Los Angeles. You can see that we have 22 opportunity zone census tracts within or intersecting the Promise Zone itself. And we just kind of like to highlight some of the other ones that are in the broader South LA community, though not necessarily overlapping with the Promise Zone itself. So lots of territory that's covered within South LA. So that means, pun intended, there are lots of opportunities to figure out what this could look like within the Promise Zone. Next slide, please. And then if we're looking at just the profile of opportunity zones within Slate Z, I'm not going to go over all of these different data points, but what we notice is also that there's not a lot of deviation from isolating the opportunity zone census tract specifically and the greater profile of promise zones more generally. So you can see that that is an obvious overlay point, and we use this to really highlight how if there are opportunities, if there are projects that people are exploring, that entities are exploring, promise zones are also a great way to try to figure out how to interface with the community and also come up with some co-created strategies on the best way to come up with community serving, community facing projects so that whatever that looks like, whatever the investment ends up being, it really serves the full purpose of what opportunity zones were kind of meant to be at the outset. Next slide, please. And from the community implementation overlay, this was generated out of the community plans that were approved at the beginning or at the end of last year, 2019. We use this to uplift some of the strategies and some of the potential incentives for projects that went through an initial community vetting process already. The community plans went through a very rigorous community engagement process that ultimately culminated in the community plans. And part of that did highlight some of the project types that would be eligible for some of these incentives. So again, these two lists arose from extremely deep engagement with our South LA and Southeast LA communities. You can do a quick search for those and can be found in the respective community plans. What we like to highlight when we mention the community plan implementation overlay is that this is more of a starting point for discussion, but we always try to emphasize the importance of engagement with the community. One risk we've seen through our history and through the decades of history of our partners is that leaving engagement with the community until the very last minute, because of the historical experience, these last minute efforts run the risk of maybe being viewed with maybe more skepticism than is necessary. There's a categorical difference between meaningful partnership and what I sometimes very flippantly label just letting the residents pick the color of the chairs. So that's why community engagement is at the forefront of what we like to do, and meaningful community engagement. So as we continue to uplift, these avoidance measures, displacement avoidance measures, we always strongly encourage fully in relationship building early, working with our CBO partners and with our residents, because the success of these projects and programs, it's really tied to the success of our residents. We believe that these types of partnerships are critical to just fully mobilizing the opportunities for the ultimate community benefit. Next slide. And just wanted to highlight some of the opportunities we've highlighted, we've uplifted for collaboration, really just looking at how we can empower collective impact backbones and CBO partners as collaborators and collaborations within the opportunity zone space, and how the Promisones can facilitate those. Highlighting culturally competent proven models for resident training and civic engagement. Again, I've harped on that point, but it's really critical, we think, to the success of ensuring residents get to enjoy the benefits that come from any type of investment. Again, emphasizing community preservation and anti-displacement, and really trying to figure out how we can bridge those gaps between experts who have experience in these fields, and then also being able to connect those to community engagement and developing plans that really uplift and implement community vision. And then finally, because we know that there's a substantial portion of the audience here, but how we can also serve as that facilitation, that connection between who might be managing opportunity funds, who might have those ideas, and then being able to connect those to community-driven investments. Ultimately, I think that's one of the bigger overlays with Promisones and opportunity zones, is just thinking about how we can serve as that bridge to community organizations, community partners, and really engage in the community engagement aspect more at the front for what I've been calling that co-creation process. So I'm getting the flag from Trey. Thank you so much for keeping me on time. Any other questions or comments? My contact information is flashed there, and I will hand it over to our next presenter. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that, Paul. Hoping everybody can hear me just good. We can straight jump into the next slide. Great. So, obviously there are two Promisones in Los Angeles, and we're neighbors, pretty close, just about less than half a mile away from the other one. I wanted to start off my presentation by giving a bit of an overview of what our kind of needs and some of our strategies that we hope to accomplish over the 10-year designation. We were awarded in 2014 one of the first round Promisones, and participate actively in the National Coalition of the Promisones. Just by reading our mission statement, want to reflect what our purpose is and what our community needs are. So the LA Promizone Partnership empowers our culturally diverse communities by aligning our efforts and resources to support family success, recognizing the importance of high-performing schools and quality educational programs, public safety, housing affordability, economic opportunity as essential elements of healthy neighborhoods. Next slide. Okay. So what we know is that the needs of the LA Promizone are rooted in intergenerational poverty and long-term lack of investment in underserved neighborhoods, which means that if we're to succeed in revitalizing these neighborhoods, we need sustained support over the course of the designation to make sure that we have sustainable change. So from looking at the numbers in poverty, in education, employment, and housing, we aim to support families across their days and their lives to academic and career success, but as well as financial stability. Next slide. So right here, you're going to look at just a quick little map of where our partners work in, stretching close to 5 square miles from East Hollywood down to Pico Union. We work with over 77 partners. The initial group of partners that we had was about 50 that signed an original MOU. And since the designation, we've added about 20, 25, 26 organizations tackled on to help tackle the intergenerational poverty that goes on in our communities. Next slide. So in 2015, the LA Promizone Strategic Plan was developed, and the following year was approved and finalized in 2016 with huge input from our partners that participated in working groups over the course of those first 2 years to make sure that all of the different priorities that we had set were included based on the priorities that each organization had at their respective organizations. So what you see on your screen is the 4 overarching goals from our application that were adopted by the partnership. So the first, I think Eric in a previous presentation had showed the five to six different kind of priority areas and policy areas that Promisones needed to kind of abide by to ensure that they would get designations. So obviously each community is able to kind of tailor those needs and tailor those kind of the purpose of what each Promizone is going to accomplish. And so just by looking at ours, you'll see that the four main goals that we had were to create economic opportunity, improve educational outcomes, make our neighborhoods safe, and build equitable and livable and sustainable communities. Obviously ensuring that we provide opportunities and resources to move up the economic ladder, all the way down to ensuring that streets and sidewalks are safe, that there's green and public spaces, and kind of promoting community assets and culture within the neighborhoods. In addition to the strategic plan, 4 working groups were also developed to help achieve all the different collective action strategies and activities that are within the plan. So just from looking at this, you'll see the 4 overarching goals, but there's about 79 individual activities that I won't list out for you, but 79 activities that we aim to accomplish over the next, I guess we're about 4 years left. So over the next couple of years. Next slide. So to date, we've been successful in securing over $318 million in federal grants awarded across 33 partner agencies. So strong collaborative applications and leveraging private resources have allowed our partners to fill in where there are gaps, but also lean in where there are strengths. These are funds that are either going directly to schools for program expansion, transportation, innovation projects, clean energy projects. Just to give you some examples, we were awarded a clean energy smart manufacturing grant about 5 years ago, which was established by the Department of Energy and is part of a network of institutes aiming to secure the future of the U.S. manufacturing through innovation, collaboration, and education. Using these technology and data analytics, CESME, which is short for Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Institute, can help manufacturers increase efficiency and productivity while reducing waste, error, and energy expenditure. CESME plans to develop a cyber makerspace to showcase existing digital manufacturing and data modeling technology, encouraging more experimentation, and train the next generation of workers right in the center of our Promizone in partnership with our local community college, LA City College. We've also had tons of funding go into our education policy areas. For example, LAUSD has a Gear Up for LA program, which targets Promizone middle school and high school students that follows them from the 6th grade all the way to their first year in college, providing strong academic and financial counseling programs, intensive extended learning programs, college and peer mentoring, and college visits for students and their families. And we've actually just had our first cohort that started in 2016 that is now in their first year of college. So we're really excited to have a full, to have seen, from start to finish a cohort get followed through and go straight into college. And then just to add another one, we've also received a $3 million grant from the Department of Transportation awarded to our local city Department of Transportation to improve transportation access to jobs, community service, and education for Promizone residents. The project, which is titled the Advanced Technologies to Improve Safety and Mobility within the LAPZ, will advance efforts already underway to reach Vision Zero Los Angeles goal of 0 traffic deaths by 2025. So this means new transportation technologies such as real-time bus arrival signs, interactive digital COIS, red light delay and crash avoidance, wireless pedestrian signal activation, and advanced bus driver assistance, which will assist pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. In addition to those really cool projects that we've had, we've also developed operation guides, data and evaluation frameworks, dashboards, and scorecards to help measure our success over the 10-year designation with the support of our local education partners, USC and UCLA, and our data partners at HUD as well. I mentioned that we received $318 million from 13 federal agencies. That's 76 total grants awarded across those 33 different partners. So, obviously showing that there's a diverse group of partners. A lot of these grants have multiple partners tacked onto it. A lot of it had to do with Promizone collaboration, Promizone being able to bring folks to the table. So obviously really excited about that opportunity. Obviously, we know that during the pandemic, we've all kind of had to shift into change management mode and really adjust and adapt to serving our community members. And so with that, we've been able to highlight some of the successes, which I have on the screen here, really acknowledging that community trust and grassroots nonprofits has been key to being able to continue a lot of the work. One of the biggest concerns that we had going into this pandemic and the economic downturn and social injustice was, what's going to happen to the community members who are receiving these services, and ensuring that they didn't really have a gap in their service delivery. And so we've seen that as a result of Promiso collaboration, as a result of the partnerships that have developed over the course of this designation, that trust and there's a way for folks to be able to trust their nonprofits that are in their communities. We've also seen philanthropy step up and provide funding to do a number of different things, whether that's food banks, grab and go sites, food delivery for seniors. We've obviously now, for those of you who have kids, much about this hybrid learning and virtual programming. We know the digital divide is real, and that was real even before the pandemic, but obviously now it's kind of an exacerbated issue. And what we've seen is now we've had tons of partners that are now providing programming for their students and families, but also digital learning workshops. And we're really excited to have applied for a number of grants this year, and just waiting to hear back to see if we're able to kind of help mitigate some of that, and in conjunction with the city being able to provide free internet service for the next 5 years. So we're looking forward to that. A lot of our partners who also provide mental health services have now turned to telehealth successfully, and have even been able to support in grant writing applications for folks who are looking to have innovative ways to do telehealth for their residents. Our resource centers are now operating remotely or by appointments. We have partners that are now providing unemployment, census, utility, legal support, and rental assistance, as well as small business support. You can go to the next slide. Obviously, there's a lot of talk on opportunity zones, so wanted to make sure that we highlighted what we have in our Promise Zone. On this slide, you'll see that our boundaries are overlaid with the approved opportunity zones. 64 out of the 65 total census tracts that are in the LA Promise Zone were actually eligible for opportunity zones. Of those, the governor ultimately, after the governor's submission ultimately was approved, 42 were ultimately approved by U.S. Treasury. And below, you also see some numbers to see how it compares across the country, state, and locally. Next slide. So last year, our leadership council stepped up. Obviously, there was a huge kind of learning period, and with the support of HUD, we were able to kind of educate ourselves on opportunity zones and just really how this was going to kind of roll out. And with the leadership that we have with our HUD partners, our HUD liaison, being able to kind of understand what we were going to be looking forward to. And our leadership council stepped up, and they wrote and approved a principal statement that would help guide opportunity zone investment, which would prioritize and ensure that income and capital functions to alleviate poverty, improve quality of life for low-income families in our communities, and promote equitable development without displacement. We prioritize investment within the LA Promise Zone, ideally to create jobs for community members with living wage and opportunities for advancement. To preserve and increase the amount of affordable housing, we encourage projects to connect low-income families in the LA Promise Zone to services to ensure they are aware of and equipped to apply for housing, and to expand locally owned small businesses, obviously understanding that local ownership expands and creates jobs and cultivates a sense of place. Next slide. Trying to run through these here. Great. So looking ahead, we obviously have several priorities. We know that even before the pandemic, families were struggling and things just weren't great. We look ahead to new opportunities that bring us together to steer families out of this crisis, and for our partnership to provide resources that are needed. So we look at this recovery and look ahead to next year as a simultaneous and interrelated effort in what we call the 3 Rs. While we continue to respond to this crisis day to day, we expect to convene our partners to begin planning for the return to social settings. This may include local meetings with families to help them understand what this means or how to stay safe as we reopen. We need to build and expand on short-term programs and services to jumpstart this recovery. And then finally, the last R, recover. We understand that it's critical that we develop the ability to rapidly deploy these resources and programs to accelerate economic recovery, which involves utilizing the Promise Zone, utilizing our local nonprofits, businesses, industry, educational institutions, and philanthropy to create jobs for our community members. Next slide. In an effort to implement that framework in 2021, we will continue to celebrate the successes of our working groups, but we know that we need enablers in order to develop, implement, and scale these efforts, but also to develop new groups, which we are now calling collective action networks. And these groups that are now much more intentional about actions, outcomes, and impact. On the screen here, you'll see the 5 groups that were created: economic recovery and job creation, education and digital equity, family stability, neighborhood recovery and reinvestment, and a funding collaborative. And the last one, which really connects to our opportunity zones, where we would obviously forecast federal, state, and local funding and alignment to the groups that are above, but also to ensure that opportunity zone funds are aligned to the principles that I shared in a few slides ago. So with that, that's my last slide. Thank you. I saw that we're running out of time here, so wanted to make sure I ended on time there. But yeah, with that, I'd thank you for the opportunity to share, what our goals are and what we're looking forward to over the next year. That's my contact information if any of you have additional questions. And with that, I'd like to pass it to Julius with Sacramento.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Elder. Can everyone see me and hear me?
You're good to go.
All right, great. So my name is Julius Austin. I am the Sacramento Promise Zone coordinator for the lead agency for the Sacramento Promise Zone, which is the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. We're the housing authority for both the city and the county of Sacramento. And I direct the day-to-day operations of the Promise Zone here under the ultimate leadership of Tyrone Roderick Williams, who is the Promise Zone director and also the Deputy Executive Director of Development for SHRA, what we'll call it. We wanted to use the whole mouthful of Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency for the rest of this presentation. Next, please. All right, so here you can see the map of the Sacramento Promise Zone. It is a 22 square mile area of Sacramento, which includes parts of North, Mid, and South Sacramento. You can see the statistics there on the right that were present during the implementation of our Promise Zone. Go ahead to the next slide, please. I'm going to try to not be redundant and try to catch us up on time. So I may breeze through a couple slides, but our Promise Zone focuses on 5 areas in partnership with hundreds of partners. We're fortunate enough that we've grown from our about 30 to 40 implementation partners to include hundreds of partners now. And we focus on education, health, jobs, economic development, and sustainably built communities. And sustainably built communities, we're talking about focusing on things such as housing and community revitalization, community safety and violence prevention, art and cultural expression, and also looking at things like combating homelessness. Next slide, please. So like the other Promise Zone, we are charged with creating high-level collaborative efforts among our federal partners, but more importantly, our local partners across all sectors. So our elected officials, our nonprofits, our business community, our colleges and universities, also our school district partners and other community leaders. And we do that by using our communications. We have social media mediums, we have e-blast mediums, and a monthly newsletter medium that we share information about the work that our partners are doing, and also share information about the opportunities and resources that partners have for the community or potentially other partners. We connect partners to one another. We are, like I said, we're fortunate enough to have great networks in our focus areas. We also, similar to the other Promise Zones, connect our partners to funding. Definitely the focus of the initiative was federal funding, but we definitely recognize the importance of making sure that there are other opportunities that are non-federal funding opportunities. And ultimately, we do that to try to create a great impact in the 5 focus areas that I mentioned, and we've been able to help bring in and account for over $176 million since our second round designation back in 2015. We definitely are a part of the National Coalition of Promisones, and I serve on the steering committee for the National Coalition. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so here I'm going to share a few of the 2020 accomplishments. Definitely is not all inclusive, but a pretty good list. We definitely wanted to make sure that during the pandemic, we were sharing COVID-19 relief resources for the community members, but also for our partners. We're really fortunate to be a part of a Sacramento Coalition for Digital Inclusion that is led by Valley Vision. And the coalition focuses on access to Wi-Fi and internet, also focuses on making sure that folks have the proper equipment that they need to access Wi-Fi and internet, and also focuses on making sure that the folks have the proper digital skills so that they can participate. We were able to partner with HUD and also partner with the National Coalition of Promisones. We led an effort to create a federal convening, which allowed 16 different federal agencies and change agent leaders to do presentations for the Promisones across the country, where they were able to share the resources and programs that they had available that can help all of the Promisones reach their goals. We partnered that with providing a federal training federal grant training for the Sacramento Promizone, and also a recognized Promizone applicant in the Stockton Promizone. HUD was able to share information to help our partners be better prepared to pursue federal grants. It was a really awesome effort. Also, we're fortunate enough here in Sacramento to have 2 Envision Centers designated, which is another HUD effort that is focused on funneling more federal resources to impoverished communities. Next slide, please. Here on this slide, you see some efforts that are really focused on homelessness and homelessness innovation. We were fortunate enough to be able to have an opportunity to provide some rental assistance. We have several homelessness efforts, including a women's shelter, and also we used a former hotel, the Capitol Park Hotel, to provide temporary housing as formerly homeless individuals were able to receive supportive services and end up in permanent housing. We also have an award-winning P3 program, which is a performance partnership pilot program that focuses on, for us, using the housing choice voucher to provide housing stability as disconnected youth receive supportive services to pursue education and job training goals to ultimately end up in livable wage jobs. Next slide, please. Continuing on with accomplishments from 2020, definitely we're really glad to be a part of an African American advisory board and a Reimagine School Safety Task Force for the Sac City Unified School District, looking at trying to improve outcomes for the African American students who are disproportionately not doing well in both academics and the culture and climate at Sac City Unified School District. We were very fortunate to be a part of a Sacramento Promiso Sustainable Communities Collaborative, which includes partner organizations such as the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Sacramento Urban League, UC Davis, SMUD, and the Sacramento Kings, among others. And that collective is focused on providing economic development and workforce development opportunities. And that group was able to create a training opportunity, which was for solar panel installation, and allowed students to be trained on solar panel installation practices and have a pipeline to jobs, livable wage jobs. Also, SMUD was able to partner with us to create an opportunity for there to be solar trees, where there could be opportunities for people to use these gigantic solar trees to energize things such as their phones. Also, we were able to fund a organization that will be implementing a pilot program in 2021, an energy baron pilot program. It will provide training for individuals to do energy efficiency and energy reduction services and buildings. And those jobs, that training will help create jobs for those individuals. And it's a very interesting pilot program because just the reduction of energy usage will pay for the position. We also were able to continue a opportunity that we call the Funding Institution Partnership Opportunity. Our partners in the FDIC and also the Federal Reserve helped us about 4 years ago to convene banks, and it resulted in banks working together and pooling funds to collectively fund projects from nonprofit organizations using CRA funds. And we don't see this happening anywhere else in the country. So it's a really pioneering and exciting collaborative effort. And then I'll skip the rest for time's sake, and you can go to the next slide, please. So we definitely have some great goals in 2021. This is not all inclusive, but just some of the highlights. We definitely want to continue to focus on COVID-19 resilience and recovery. Definitely going to continue focusing on digital inclusion. We see how important that is, and this pandemic is shining a huge light on the necessity for folks to have digital access so they can participate in things such as distance learning, teleworking, telehealth, and et cetera. Definitely going to continue our homelessness efforts, focusing on that. There will be a Sacramento food assessment. We were able to help a partner receive a planning grant to assess the food system here in Sacramento with a focus on providing more inclusion. Definitely going to focus on literacy and education efforts, and also workforce development efforts that will include making sure that Section 3 HUD focus on providing jobs and opportunities for low-income residents and minority residents. I definitely want to focus on internships. We see that there's going to be a need for more people to kind of change course and pursue jobs in maybe different areas than they used to. And apprenticeships can be a great opportunity for that, because folks will still be able to get paid as they train and learn new trades and new skills. Definitely going to be a need to focus on digital jobs, since a lot of us are teleworking, and we are projecting that many people will continue to do so even after we get out of the depths of the pandemic. Also, transitional skill development, as I mentioned before, and with all of these efforts, definitely a huge focus on inclusion and social justice. Next slide, please. All right, here you can see in the Sacramento Promise Zone, the overlap of opportunity zones, census tracts, and also Promise Zone census tracts. We have 33 census tracts in our Promise Zone, and of those 33 census tracts, 17 are opportunity zones, and overall in the Sacramento area, there are 44 opportunity zone census tracts. If you take a look at some of the things that we've done that is related to opportunity zones, we've been able to have opportunity zone workshops that were able to inform, educate, and empower investors, nonprofits, and businesses. And we did a focus on small businesses and developers. Been able to serve on panels with entities like Cal-OZ. We were able to host Scott Turner, who is the executive director of the White House Council on Opportunity Zones here in Sacramento, and had him engage with investors, developers, and some of our local nonprofit partners. Also, we partnered and doing workshops and et cetera with entities like Valley Vision, KPMG, GO-Biz, and the Small Business Administration. And then we make sure we do efforts to inform and educate our partners about opportunity zone preference points so they could take advantage of pursuing some of the federal grants that Eric Yost mentioned earlier in the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so directly in the Promise Zone, I'm sure there's other opportunity zone efforts, but in an area that we call the River District, there's a good concentration of opportunity zone happenings and investments. At SHRA, we have kind of the largest housing development project because it's called Marisol Village. It's going to be a mixed income, so public housing, low income housing, and market rate housing mixed all in one project. It'll also be multimodal with opportunities for different forms of transportation, which will include Sacramento RT implementing a new public transit stop, and also will include amenities such as multi-use community spaces, community gardens, parks, and walking and biking pathways. Next slide, please. So also in that River District, there will be the Rail Yard Stadium, which will be the new home of the Sac Republic soccer team. Also, there is a market rate housing development called Cannery Place. Also, there will be a new Kaiser Permanente Sacramento Rail Yards Medical Center. And there you can see a shot of the potential SAC RT new stop as well. So definitely some great benefits have already been mentioned of engaging with promise zones and mixing that with opportunity zones, using our collective impact and our understanding of our community landscapes and the players in the community and connection to the community members. Also an opportunity to layer and leverage funding in regard to the federal grants and other non-federal funding we're able to access with our partners. And there definitely is some great opportunities and areas of need. Paul mentioned many of those things in the incentives portion of his presentation, but there is certainly a need for more in Sacramento, specifically a need for more low-income housing. Definitely wouldn't hurt to have more medical facilities, more retailers, offices and shared space, especially with a influx of the tech industry flooding to Sacramento's opportunities for things such as business incubators. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank you all for listening to my portion of the presentation. I'd like to turn it over to CEO.
Great, thank you. So I'll try to keep it to the 8-minute mark. Hi, everyone. My name is CEO Malice Crespo, but I go by CEO. I am the program manager for the San Diego Promise Zone, which is housed under the City of San Diego's Economic Development Department. So To those, next slide. Thank you. So to those familiar with Sunny San Diego, our Promise Zone spans some of the city's most economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, including Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Southeastern, Encanto, and parts of East Village. For those less familiar with San Diego, definitely booked that trip after COVID. And we're talking about roughly 6.4 square miles bounded by the San Diego Unified Port District to the west, downtown San Diego, and State Route 94 to the north. And you can see it in both maps. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense of the community makeup, the San Diego Promise Zone has a little over 80,000 residents, of whom 71% identify as Hispanic Latino and 12% are Black or African American. The unemployment rate before COVID-19 and the related recession was 10.9% overall, but 11.6% of Hispanic Latino residents and 13.8, so almost 14 for Black African American residents. And this is all significantly higher than the citywide rate, which is 6.3%. More than 1/3 of residents have not completed high school, and the median household income is less than half of the median income citywide. Which is, basically in the population, nearly 60% of residents live under 200% of the federal poverty level, which is considered poor or struggling. As you may assume from this statistic alone, this was an extremely challenging year for the Promise Zone residents and businesses. The Promise Zone has been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 pandemic on two specific fronts. So although the Promise Zone population is 2.5% of county residents, 10.8% of county COVID-19 case reside in the Promise Zone 4 zip codes. So you can see the impact in there. And then the effects of the pandemic have in turn led to grave economic injury in the Promise Zone and worse outcomes relative to the rest of the region, where the 92113 zip code, covering more than half of the Promise Zone, was the hardest hit area in the entire county for increased unemployment figures. Next slide, please. So with that context in mind, and as designated in during the 2016 round, which is where we got the Promise Zone designation, we have 6 main goals: creating jobs, increasing economic activities, improving educational opportunities, creating a priority of safety, increasing access to quality, affordable housing, and increasing access to healthcare and healthy foods. To achieve these goals, our partners participate in working group meetings that focus on leveraging funding opportunities and resources from all levels. We're talking federal, state, local, philanthropic, you name it. One thing that is unique to the San Diego's Promise Zone, however, is that it is the only urban Promise Zone where all of its census tracts are also designated opportunity zones. So we definitely see, the opportunity for collaboration given the overlap. Next slide, please. Going back to our partners, though, there are 65 supporting partners that span several disciplines, and some of them that I wanted to highlight is the Small Business Development Center, Local Initiative Support Coalition, the San Diego County Office of Education. Some of our implementing partners, however, that have been with us since the very beginning are several city departments, the Jacob Center for Neighborhood Innovation, the Housing Commission here in San Diego, and as well as the San Diego Workforce Partnership. Next slide, please. In terms of key accomplishments, we have collectively pursued nearly 40 grants, resulting in an estimated $50 million in funding. But more particularly this year, the Economic Development Department established a Small Business Relief Fund in rapid response to the pandemic, which literally turned the department into a bank overnight for all intents and purposes. And we were able to provide additional allocation to the Promise Zone businesses to provide over 150 businesses grants of up to $10,500, and the city allocated about $700,000 with the intent of targeting the Promise Zone's key demographic and to provide technical assistance and micro grants as well. So we also submitted an application to the Economic Development Administration, and through this grant proposal in particular, we held over 40 meetings to arrive at an application titled Digital Inclusion in the Promise Zone, in which we worked with over 70 partners, 11 of which have funded roles, to fund a strategic vision for the Promise Zone that includes a funding plan and a needs assessment, as well as pilot projects with key community partners to help the community as soon as the funding is received to really bridge that digital divide. Lastly, as part of the transition of operations into the digital world because of the pandemic, we also partnered with UC San Diego to adjust its nutrition program to reach our partners through this new reality, and supported partners in mobilizing our networks, walking businesses, and renters through the regulatory landscape, and as well as different types of relief and resources to just provide relief at this time. Next slide, please. Our work continues. Over the last couple of months, we have gone through the process of looking at our previous goals and priorities for each group and providing the community with a place to really voice their needs so that we're able to fine tune the value provided by the Promiso initiative, especially since the pandemic changes our reality every day. So our main priority over the next year, we envision that will be the digital equity and inclusion piece. It's a priority that spans several working groups, and we're talking about tackling 4 pillars in particular. We're talking about improving access to broadband internet, connected devices, digital literacy resources, and environments conducive to work and learning. We also envision, some of our key priorities for fiscal year 2021 to be increasing and improving access to capital and really building that ecosystem to make a more sustainable way of funding to the Promiso, creating environments conducive to learning and working, as I said, collaborating with health agencies and service providers, and providing as well, small business assistance and relief, especially as related to the pandemic, and then championing anchor institutions to make sure that their programs are supported through it all. So we're also currently undergoing a strategic planning exercise with the leadership of each working group to revitalize the work that they're doing by attaching specific actionable items that meet our goals and priorities with clear, measurable outcomes. So our intent is to really empower the community to own this initiative and to revitalize the work of the Promiso at large by building off of some of our successes. Next slide, please. This is mostly what I wanted to share. I wanted to be as concise as possible, but I do have some parting thoughts. I really appreciate all of the information that our sister Promiso partners, our sister cities have shared. I do agree that the success of our partners really drives the success of any Promiso initiative. And looking forward, community engagement will be pivotal and super important. And as we look at the sustainability of the investment going into the Promiso, it will be just as important to identify ways in which we can expand the capacity of our residents and therefore the resilience of anchor institutions as well. So that will be our ultimate success. If our partners are succeeding, then so are we. So thank you to GO-Biz for providing us with the opportunity to share with this group some of the work that we're doing and some of the exciting things that 2021 hold. So I look forward to exploring how we can collaborate for our community here in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sio, and thank you to all of our Promisones. We're just going to jump into a couple quick questions. We did have one question in the Q&A section. Specifically for the Sacramento Promiso. It was around the health initiative. You mentioned that health was one of your focuses, and they wanted to know, does this include food access, urban agriculture, or any deliberate food-related programs, like farmers markets, for example?
So my video, I think, Traylon, if you could give me access to start my video, or I could just, there we go. All right, so yeah, it certainly includes all of those things. There is a huge focus on farmers markets, also providing opportunity for there to be usage of EBT in farmers markets. I mentioned that there was a partner we helped receive a grant to focus on the SAC food system. So that includes agriculture, retail, economic development opportunities, and et cetera. So certainly includes all the above.
All right, thanks for your response. My colleague Robert is going to ask one question to the group, and then we will hopefully have a couple minutes to take a break before the next panel.
Thank you, Ashley. I just wanted to follow up with this can be to all of you just on some common themes that we know want the community to own it. And one of the also common themes was the importance in digital inclusion and equity in the coming year, 2021. And I was just curious if any of you would be able to speak a little bit about on maybe challenges regarding, I know you had some success in the San Diego Promiso with funding sources. I believe there was an EDA EDA grant that you were able to receive to help with this, but digital as well. I think we'd be interested in hearing that.
I think you cut off, but if I am, yeah. So that wasn't just me, right? So I think that you were trying to ask about funding sources for this particular priority. So we went through a really comprehensive process in which we kind of really rallied the community to really own a part of that ADA application that we submitted. These were particularly, this particular fund of money was related directly to the response to COVID, and we were able to really make the case for, 4 pillars, as I mentioned earlier, to really build on not only the provision of devices and making sure that everyone's connected, but also providing the digital literacy that you need in order to really be able to, perform in anything that you do in any device. But then also, how do we foster environments in which you're able to learn, you're actually able to show up to class and be able to perform at work. So that's basically what our application included. I think that we're at a point, at least in the San Diego Promise Zone, in which a comprehensive needs assessment around the needs of the community, and that really looks at every population and every demographic is really needed. But the community also needs funding now, so we also applied for a as part of the application, we included some pilot projects that get at some of the goals that we want to achieve ultimately with the digital inclusion priority. In the meantime, that this is all contingent on funding. We haven't received the funding. We submitted the application, and we have gotten some hopefully good feedback from the EDA, which we're really excited about. We continue to work with the EDA and other agencies in our HUD liaison, shout out to Pauline over at the LA office, to make sure that we are applying and really fostering that collaboration that happened through that EDA grant, and using that application as a blueprint for any type of funding that we do pursue. But we are in constant communication with federal agencies that could potentially fund this. In the meantime as well, I stretch my resources thin as well. We are looking at ways in which our partners and here at the city, we can start implementing some of the things that were included in that kind of blueprint of sorts. So one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is partnering up with the local ISPs and the local providers to really provide, digital literacy resources, and, to be able to bring speakers that can speak to a more collective impact approach to digital inclusion through a series of webinars that we're kickstarting this month. So all of this to say, we're looking through all of the ways in which you can really bring in the investment to drive that priority.
I thank you so much, Sio, for your response. I just wanted to open it up to some of our other Promise Zone partners if they wanted to discuss a little bit about how they're addressing this issue as well.
I'll chime in. We're fortunate enough that through some CARES Act funding, United Way was able to obtain some funding to help individuals gain more access to Wi-Fi access in partnership with some of the internet service providers. Also, some of that funding went towards providing some of the necessary equipment, so computers, hotspots, and et cetera, for individuals. And then we also have a group called Amazon Web Services in partnership with the California Emergency Tech Fund. Have funds available for us to pursue. We're pursuing the possibility of creating a pilot where AWS can create a kind of a standalone G5 network. So it's a network that will be separate from the normal internet service providers, but it will be high speed, high quality, free opportunity for access to Wi-Fi for one of our elementary schools and two of our public housing sites. And so that's some of the funding. Definitely will be pursuing more funding because I think people are thinking about access to Wi-Fi access to the equipment and digital skills. But there's certainly, now that we've all kind of collectively taken a dive into using digital mediums more, there's going to be an increased need for cybersecurity. So that's another thing that we all should be thinking about and focusing on.
All right, thank you so much, Julius. We have probably just a couple more minutes for one more partner to chime in before we close up our panel.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I wanted to say that you know, with the digital divide and digital learning, we were actually fortunate. About a year ago, before the pandemic, we were actually partners with an organization called Everyone On, that was providing about 100 seniors with free tablets, digital learning workshops, and free internet service for the next 2 years. So that kind of overlapped with the pandemic, obviously not having expected that. But the great thing about that partnership, you know, they were able to provide that service to a bunch of our leaders and organizations that were in our Promise Zone, but they were able to actually have the opportunity to build on that partnership and apply for more funding in the next year. So that includes this year. And what we're able to do with our collaboration now, with our partnership, is the mayor just announced another initiative called Project 10 Million, which would offer 18,000 students for the next 5 years, 100 gigabytes of free internet connectivity to those students. So using our collaboration, using our partners to be able to actually spread that message out and connect all the students that are actually within our Promise Zone to that initiative. So we're really excited about that.
All right, thank you so much, Elder, and thank you to all of our Promise Zones for presenting. I am going to pass it back over to Trey.